Hey everybody, it's Amber Carnes from Body Positive Yoga, and I'm here today with one of my body image heroes, Rosie Molinari. Hi, Rosie.
Hello, Amber.
So I just want to tell you a little bit about Rosie, and then we're going to get started and have a little chat. Rosie is an author, speaker, and a teacher, and she works with women to empower them to embrace their authentic selves so they can live out their passion and purpose and give their gifts to the world. And Rosie is the author of Beautiful You, A Daily Guide to Radical Self-Acceptance, and Hijas Americanas. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad.
That was all right.
A book on Latina body image in America. And in addition to writing, she teaches body image at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and teaches workshops or retreats and speaks about self-acceptance and body image and the Latina experience and social justice all around the country and probably all around the world at this point, right? So welcome, Rosie, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm honored to be here.
So the first time I heard of you was through your book, Radical Self-Acceptance. I have my copy right here. And if you haven't read this book or if you haven't seen it, please run out and get it. And I will put a link to the book in the post where I share this video. I found your book at the library, so random. And I was like, oh, this is a great cover. And so I just grabbed it and I was like, okay, I'll look through this with the stack of books. And I loved it so much that I ended up running an online body image book club around it. And so many women benefited from it. It is, I think, just an awesome resource about self-acceptance and self-care. And we really need that in a society that tells us to do the opposite. So tell us a story about why you wanted to write this book and maybe how it came to be.
So I'll rewind a little bit and say that I think some of my experience with Hijas Americanas ended up inspiring Beautiful You. And Hijas Americanas is about the coming of age experiences of Latina women throughout the U.S. And so I interviewed 100 women and did a web-based survey with 500 women about their coming of age experiences. And then that all got compiled and mixed with my own stories to make up Hijas Americanas. And when I was touring with that book, one of the things that struck me was that people would come up to me and say, I'm not Latina, but this is my story. And the place where people really connected were around the body image, identity, self-actualization, self-acceptance places. And so about that time, I started teaching the body image course at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, and I was doing workshops and the like, and people would come up to me and say, what are some things that I can do to improve my relationship with myself? And I'd say, oh, this and this and this and this. And they were all little steps that could be pieced together. And so finally, I just thought it would be great to put this all together in a book. And so that is how Beautiful You came into being. And the idea was that I think that there are two parts of our relationship with ourselves that have to be reconciled for us to go out and live on purpose. And the first part is that we have to have a pretty keen self-awareness. I think that we need to know what our values and talents are, what makes us comfortable and uncomfortable, and how to create a life that allows those things to exist. And then the second part is that we have to have a good relationship with ourselves where we're not turning ourselves and our ideas down. And so what I wanted to do with Beautiful You was to create a journey for people that allowed them to build that self-awareness while also building that more comfortable relationship with themselves and really sort of develop those two things. And the way that the book works is that there's basically 365 days of a short essay and then a little exercise. And it becomes a little bit of a choose your own adventure because not every exercise will be right for everybody. And so people can go through it and sort of work through it. And for some people, it may be a full 365-day journey, but for other people, it might be a 300-day journey once they go through and sort of figure out what sticks. But the idea was just really gently finding a way to encourage women to develop that relationship with themselves. Because I think it's our most important relationship, but it's often the one we put on the back burner to allow other responsibilities to take front stage.
Right, because I think we get a lot of messages as women especially and as caretakers that spending time on ourselves is selfish or indulgent or, not as important, like you should put others first. And all those are I think, can be really insidious ways of getting us kind of away from, put the oxygen mask on yourself first and then you can help everybody else. So I mean, what would you say to somebody that would say like, oh, I can't do self-care, I can't take care of myself in those ways because it's selfish, or I have to put my kids first or whatever?
So what's interesting to me is I think that a lot of us get the message that our body matters, but our body matters in how it's physically packaged and
Mm.
not how it feels.
Mm.
And so we feel like, okay, we're supposed to go through the motions of making our physical appearance matter, but we're not supposed to worry about how our body feels and it's functioning. And our bodies do matter, but not for the reason that we think they do. Like the way that my body look has neither here nor there to do with what I'm able to do effectively in my life, but how it feels does. And
Mm.
so how it feels can really, inhibit my ability to be impactful in someone's life. And I think that what I would say to someone who's sort of going back and forth with that is that you can't afford not to take care of yourself, because if you're not able to run and function properly, there's no way that you can support anyone else. So for all the meaningful work that we want to do in this world, the base starts with our body being able to function in a way that supports us so that we can go out and be on purpose.
Yeah, that's so important, I think. So speaking of that, speaking of self-care and taking care of our bodies and wanting to feel good, what are a couple of pieces of practical self-acceptance or self-care advice, either from the book or that you just found important to your own life?
I think the first one is realizing that self-acceptance is a choice. I think a lot of people think you either have it or you don't. And if I
Mm-hmm.
don't happen to have that kind of attitude, well, then I'm just never going to have it. But it's actually a choice, and it's a choice that you make over and over again to not have an adversarial reaction or relationship with yourself. And so if you start to have this negative thinking or talking, then you can say to yourself, I've decided to have a different relationship with myself. Stop. And what's interesting is you'll have to do that a lot at first, but then it actually ebbs, and you have other stuff going on to focus on. You've talked yourself out of that type of relationship. So that's the first thing I'd say, is that if you want to have a healthier relationship with yourself, just remind yourself at every turn where it's not healthy and positive, that all of this is about the choice that you're making. And then the second thing I'd say is to remember that everything is information. I think we take in so many things and think that it's a real litmus test on who we are or how we are in the world. And actually, little moments are just information. So let's say that I forgot to meet a friend yesterday for lunch. I could think I'm the worst friend ever. I could think I'm so dumb, I'm so irresponsible, all those sort of things. Or I can step back and say, that's unlike me to miss a lunch. What was going on there? And it might be like, oh, you know what? I didn't look in my calendar the day before, so I hadn't prepared myself for the day. Or it might be, wow, I got that phone call from my mom about what's going on with my grandmother right before lunch, and it was so upsetting to me, I forgot to look up from it. So I think that it's really important to look at situations where maybe we are not our most stellar, and instead of saying what's wrong with me, say what's the information for me to gather from that experience, and really use those opportunities as ways to grow and not as ways to challenge or critique ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think just to like swing it back to yoga for a second, we talk about in yoga developing that mindfulness, which I like to define as paying attention on purpose without judgment, and like letting that create space for you to observe a situation. Like you said, something that's very common, a lot of people could relate to, like missing a lunch or an appointment or disappointing a friend somehow. And instead of, like you said, beating yourself up, being able to observe and just say like, okay, I'm not going to worry too much about whether that makes me like a good person or a bad person, but just like go ahead and respond. I think that's really important. So
I love in that sort of that practice of yoga, when I'm on the mat and something sort of surprises me with how it feels, to like take that moment and think about, well, why might it feel this way? Right? I'm just gathering information. So it may be that my neck feels wonky because I really like to sleep on my back, but I've been flipping over lately, and so I'm jacking my neck up when I sleep. Or, whatever the case may be, maybe my abs are sore because my little guy needed me to carry him more this weekend or whatever. I really like sort of that practice of saying, what's the information in this, in my physical body as well as my emotional or mental body?
mm-hmm. I've heard you talk a lot and read in your writings, your blog and things about authenticity and purpose and passion, and especially about giving our gifts to the world. Can you talk a little bit about your work around that and maybe any advice for figuring out what our gifts are and how we can best offer them to the world?
I think that most people think of me as a body image activist, which isn't wrong, but it's like a lot bigger than that. For me, I am just a global activist. There's a lot of stuff that really fires me up and, inspires me into action. And so for me, the body image work is really important because I feel like every single one of us is here on purpose. We all have a mission that we are meant to serve on this planet. It may be a couple missions over our lifetime, but at any given time, we each have a purpose that is uniquely ours. And this world is full of need, it's full of hurts and pains, and each one of us is a part of the solution towards healing the world. And I think that one of the reasons why we haven't realized this like perfect planet that we want to realize is because we don't always have the best relationships with ourselves. And so we get in our own way of being able to do the work we're meant to do in the world, which means that we get in the planet's way of healing. And so for me, my fundamental belief is you are here on purpose. Like every single one of us is here on purpose. And so I like the idea of working with people to help them reconcile their relationships with themselves, which is a self-acceptance piece, but then to hone in on, all right, once I feel healthier and happier about what it is I have to offer the world, well, how do you hone in on what that is and what the best expression of that is? And for some of us, we may be fortunate enough to be able to have that expression professionally. And some of us may not be able to have that expression professionally, but we can have it in personal ways in our lives. And so in terms of thinking about, well, how do I figure out what gift it is I'm meant to give to the world right now? I think that it's important to think about what your hot spots have been historically and what they are now. So I like to ask folks, like, if the news is on, what story, and you're walking through the room, what kind of stories will make you stop and listen? And what kind of stories make you want to talk back to the television? Like, no, that's not right, or yes, that's right. So think about those things. And then think about, all right, so now I've done that and I've got like 5 or 6 topic areas that are interesting to me. Then I like to ask the question, if you could have the microphone, the global microphone for 5 minutes and deliver a message to the world, what's the message? What do you need to make sure that everyone understands when you're done with them? Everybody's going to hear you. What do you need to, and it's going to be translated in every language in the world. What must everyone understand when you're done? So now that you have that piece, so you have this idea of what issues fire you up, and then you have this idea of like, this is the thing that I really want to nail into everyone's brain. And then I like for people to think about what ways they're most comfortable expressing these things. And so they might say, oh, I like to write about this, or I like to talk about this, or I like to teach one-on-one about this, and just start to get a sense of how they like to be in community, what type of talent they have for offering that healing. And then you begin to look forward for ways to express that. I want to back up, though, and say that I think one of the reasons why we don't always live on purpose is because we spread ourselves really, really thin. And so I think that a lot of times we're capable of a lot more than maybe where we need to focus the bulk of our energy. And so we say yes, 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 because we're technically capable of making cookies for the bake sale or whatever the case may be. But when we devote our energy there and it's not a passion place, then it diffuses some of our energy. And so we can't give as much to the place where we're most meant to be. And so I like to really encourage people to think about what they can do wholeheartedly. And if there's something that you're doing out of some sort of obligation, with the exception of like, I can't get away with not doing laundry for my family, although I have a great partner who also helps with that. Like there's some things you have to do out of obligation.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of things we don't need to do out of obligation. And so getting as pure as possible on your commitment so that you can make time and energy and clear the creative space in your brain to find the unique expression you're meant to have right now in terms of living on purpose.
Man, that is some powerful advice right there. And I do like the advice of kind of weeding out the things that really drive you and make you feel authentic and passionate, and the stuff that kind of just gets piled on our plates because. And I wonder if, I know one of the ways that we could start to do that is that those little pieces of information that you talked about, like when you're doing this activity, how do you feel in your body? Like, did your stomach suddenly get tight? Are you breathing more shallow? Like, do you just feel rotten all of a sudden? Like, those can be some really big clues. I think our body sends us a lot of messages that can help
Yeah,
us.
and I think it does before we catch on. And I think about one of my first steps. I have this continue. I call it the continuum of wholeheartedness, and I try to say yes to things that I feel wholehearted about all the way through. And so the first step is, am I happy to be asked? And so let's say that I get an email from someone and they're like, "Oh, here's what's going on. I was wondering if you could come to this meeting." If I turn to my calendar and think, "Oh my goodness, I hope there's something there and I can't go," well, then I need to say no, even if there's nothing there and I can go. Like, I need to say no if that's my reaction. But if I'm like, "Oh, I hope my calendar is clear," then I know, like, okay, I'm wholehearted in the ask and I'm wholehearted in my answer. And can I be happy to do the prep work? And can I be happy to be there? And then can I be happy to clean up and do the breakdown work of it? And so making sure that there's this joyous thread all the way through. Not that it won't be hard, not that there won't be uncomfortable moments, but that it all feels worth it. And one of the things that I like to remind folks is we think we have to say yes, but the reality is, if we believe that we are all here on purpose, if we say no to someone, then what we're actually doing is creating the possibility of them getting closer to the person who's meant to say yes for that. Like, our no is really someone else's yes. And I think sometimes we just think we need to take one for the team and help out, when actually we might be getting in the way of someone else living on purpose.
Yeah, that is a great way to reframe that. So you always have really interesting and illuminating stories about your students. You teach classes about body image and different things like that. So tell us about your classes at University of North Carolina, maybe this semester or maybe in the past. What have you discovered or learned, or what surprised you? What's a great story from there lately?
Oh my gosh, teaching is such a gift to me. It makes me a student all the time. I think the most interesting thing I'm seeing right now is related to this idea of effortless perfection. And that is really this term that was coined in 2003 at Duke University. And a student was talking about how she felt like there was this insane pressure, not just to be perfect, but to be effortlessly perfect. And so that women on campus were expected to be intelligent and pretty and athletic and good and stylish and have good hair and all these things, on top of making it look like they just woke up that morning and that's how they were, that it was all effortless. And that kind of pressure was really devastating. And I see that, when I talk about that with my students, I mean, there are these light bulbs that go off in recognition of that being what their experience is. And I think that we all technically know that there's no perfect, but then we make this deal with ourselves where we're like, well, I would like to be the person who gets as close to perfect as possible. Like, I know nobody can get there, but I'd like to be honorary mention. I'd like to be first runner up on getting as close to perfect. And so one of the things that I tell my students is, well, if perfect doesn't exist, if we all can objectively say that, well, the reality is there can be no inverse. Like, there can't be an imperfect if there's no perfect. And so the reality is that there just is. Like, we are each made for our own unique expression. And if we weren't supposed to have our own unique expression, we wouldn't have shown up as such a diverse species as we are. And so I think for them, that's the piece where, when I say that early on in the semester, they work through reconciling that message for themselves over the course of the semester and feeling out how they can show up in that. And I think that's true for my young men as well as my young women, like that they're all trying to figure out how to let go of this idea of perfection. My graduate school manuscript, I have an MFA in creative writing, was called Giving Up Beauty. And it was really about this idea of this collection of essays and poems. And it was about this idea of giving up the notion that I had to be beautiful and that there was a certain way that I needed to look in order to be valuable to society. And if I were to write a collection of essays now, I think it would be called Giving Up Perfect. Like, I think it would be about giving up this idea that there's a certain way you have to be in the world to have worth. Because I think that the way each one of us shows up right now is so incredibly worthy and enough, and that we're the only ones that don't recognize that. Like we don't see that for ourselves, but I can say like, wow, Amber, connecting with you was awesome for all these incredible reasons. And you're like, really? And so I think for us to give up this notion of perfect would be really powerful. And that's the piece that I'm seeing so intentionally engage, like my students are so intentionally engaging with right now. I think that one of the drawbacks, there was so much good that came out of sort of the equal rights movement in the 60s, but I think that one of the drawbacks that came out of it, especially for women, was this idea that I think that the trailblazers during that time intended for there to be an opportunity for women to be able to do anything. And I think that the way that it's been translated to young women is that they should be able to do everything. And I think that relieving ourselves of that expectation of being able to do everything is a really important one to reconcile our relationships with ourselves and to get pure and intentional and authentic.
Mm-hmm. So tell us some pieces of your body image story. Maybe what was it like growing up? How has body image kind of come into play for you throughout your teenage years or as a young adult? And how do you relate differently to your body now than you did maybe in the past?
I think there are two sort of significant themes in my body image story growing up. One was that other people reacted to my body. I was for a long time the only Latina that I or anyone else knew in my area. And so my body was different and my looks were different and people reacted to that. And it made me feel really unsafe. And so my reaction to that was to disassociate from my body. And so I had a real sort of lack of body awareness growing up. But then the second piece of it is that related to my ethnic identity, because I looked different then, I also just always felt really awkward, really sort of not okay. And it was compounded when I went to college and went to a place that wasn't very diverse and sort of felt like I was just different enough not to be interesting. And I ultimately had this moment. I remember just really wanting people to react to me in the same way. Like if they all said, oh, you're not all that pretty, well, that'd be good because at least I knew, well, like that's where I stand. Or, whatever. I just wanted a definitive reaction to who I was. And I finally thought, you have to be responsible for your reaction to your reflection. You are in charge of you. And for me, that was such a liberating moment of realizing, like, it doesn't really matter. It's not any of my business what anyone else thinks about how I look. Like, it just isn't. It's not any of my business what anyone thinks about how I act or anything else. Like, it is only my business. And that, for me, was this really empowering moment. It came at a price. I mean, by the time I was a senior in high school, I was significantly underweight and had a teacher confront me about my weight. And had to very deliberately put on some weight before going to college to be safe. And one thing I remind myself about is that I have this ability to disassociate from my body, that's a real easy place for me to go. It's real easy for me to go all cerebral because that's what I used as a coping mechanism when I didn't understand my body. And so that is for me where self-care really came in. I got really sick as a teacher. I was a young high school teacher and loved it. And I was a coach and director of student activities. And I got incredibly sick because I was a compulsive workaholic. And I had this emergency room doctor who I saw twice in 1 week really confront me about it and say, you're doing this to yourself. And I was so angry at him at the time because I felt like, no, I work in this Jeremy high school. That's what's doing it to me. And then when the second time that I saw him in that week, he wouldn't clear me to go back to work. And so I had this forced quarantine at home and I was so mad sitting on my couch. And then I thought, what if I allow for the fact that I did do this to myself in some ways? Yes, I was exposed to a lot of germs, but I knew I was sick weeks ago. I never took myself to the doctor. And, what if I allow for some of what he's saying to be true? And that for me is what made me super aware of self-care. And that self-care is this type of preventative medicine that allows you to do what you're meant to do. Like, it was ironic to me that I never went to the doctor when I was sick during that time because I didn't want my kids to have a substitute teacher for a period. And then I got so sick that they were going to have a substitute teacher for weeks because my doctor wouldn't clear me to go back. And so I thought, that's a powerful lesson for me about self-care. If I'd taken one class period, one substitute to go to the doctor and get an antibiotic, this wouldn't have all happened. And that's for me when the exchange rate for self-care became real clear. And so I think the very best habit I have now is that every year I sit down at the beginning of the year and write sort of a care and feeding instructions for Rosie Molinari and say, what do I think I need to do this year to feel healthy? And because what I needed as a 28-year-old version of me is different from what I need as a 41-year-old version of me. And so I write that out, and then it's in my to-do notebook. And I look at it every week when I plan the next week and say, what are the things from this list I'm going to make sure I'm doing? And some of them are just really good habits in my daily life, like drinking a lot of water and the type of meals that I plan. But some of them I have to say, massage is good for me, and I haven't had one in a while, and I need to schedule that. Or I've been doing too much yoga on my own, and I need to get to a class just to trump it up a little bit. And so for me, that's probably my best habit now is honoring my body because of respecting how I want it to feel and knowing that how it feels is whether or not I can live on purpose.
So you gave us a few little nuggets of like practical self-care stuff that you do. I love the idea of sitting down and kind of making a care and feeding manual. That is such an awesome idea. I'm going to have to do that. I know it's not the first of the year, but so what? I may just do that anyway now. So what are some other things, what does your self-care look like? Well, let's say for 2015, since you kind of take stock of that regularly.
So there's some things that I like to do every day. So I like to drink a whole lot of water. I meal plan, and I try to meal plan with the whole big picture in mind. So I meal plan each week, like on Friday, I meal plan for the next week and try to make sure that it's a pretty diverse group of food that goes on. And sort of our rule at home, we have a little boy, is that we try to eat pretty healthy at home so that we don't have to worry about it when we go out in the world, and we eat most of our meals at home. So if we go out in the world and I want to have something that, maybe doesn't have a whole lot of vegetables on the side, I feel okay about that because I know that I'm getting good nutrients at home. I am really a stickler about my doctor's appointments. That's something that, when I sit down in January and do that wellness prescription, I think back to when was the last time I had blood work done? When was the last time I had a mammogram? When was the last time I had a physical? And make sure that those appointments are scheduled, my dental appointments, my eye appointments, and all that. So that's something that sort of the first time I do it, I get on the phone and I get that all scheduled. I do like body work. I do most of my yoga at home on my own, but I try to make sure that I'm going to classes at least every other week, if not a little bit more frequently than that, just to be reminded, because when I do yoga at home, I do my favorite poses. And, they don't all necessarily feel great, but they're my favorite poses. And I know that while, yes, I should do my favorite poses, I need to, have some encouragement and do some things that I don't necessarily love. And so, I'll look at my list and say, yoga class is on here, which means not just doing it on my own. When was the last time I went? And I'll pull out the schedule and make sure I get that scheduled. I try to stretch every single day. That's on my list. And for a while, until I build the habit of doing it every single day, I put it on my daily to-do list. Like it's there. So I have the satisfaction of, checking it off. And once it's a habit, it's not there. I had to find a non-impact way of doing strength work. And so I found a really good workout for that. And so I do that 4 or 5 times a week and then try to do cardio a couple times a week. What else is on there? Going out with girlfriends is on there. So that's for me something that's really good for my mental health. And so that's on there. As a family, we do a fun thing every season where we sit down one night at dinner and say, what are some things we want to do together this season that this season lends itself to? And like in the fall, it might be going apple picking or going to a pumpkin patch. In the winter, it might be going sledding if we get the weather for it. And so that's always really fun. So with spring coming up, we'll plant a family garden and then try to chase away the deer and rabbit and not succeed, but we'll have fun trying. And so that I think is a fun way too. And I think it's a nice way to model to our little boy that you can make real choices about what your life looks like. And so that is for us a fun expression of, doing those things.
I love it. What do you have coming up that you're excited about or that other folks can participate in with you?
Well, I think that I'm planning some longer retreats. Typically I'll do like morning type workshops, but I'm planning some longer retreats. I'm hoping to do a self-acceptance slash purposeful living retreat in May in Charlotte, and then one possibly in Nashville. And so those are probably the big things coming up, is just branching out to a little bit longer events now that my little guy's in school and doesn't need me hovering over him just as much as I, used to.
Awesome. So thank you so much for talking with us today. We're going to wrap this up, but what's one piece of body positive advice you'd leave us with for anybody who's watching?
All right. So one thing I'd like to encourage people to remember or to realize is that if someone says something to you about your body or your station in life, it's not about you. It's about that person and what they have going on with that issue. And when we have pain in our lives, we often try to figure out a way to feel better. And so unfortunately, if you're not in a healthy place, you might think that the best way to feel better is to make someone else feel bad. And so I think that sometimes if you're a kind, sensitive person, you can be a sitting duck for someone who's not feeling good in their lives. And so they might say, oh, Sally, you'd be so pretty if XYZ. And you're wounded by that because you're the type of empathetic person who feels like, well, why would they ever say something mean just to be mean? Like, they must mean that. And now I've got this wound. And so I think it's really important to realize that people will serve as stuff that really is their stuff repackaged. And it's important to not take that package, to not listen to the one. I think a lot of us in our lives, if I were to say, what's all the racket in your head, and you were to splice it out, it was stuff that was said to you by someone else in some way. And if you can realize that was them just trying to pass off their pain and doesn't have to be your pain, you can really begin to heal yourself in a powerful way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosie, for talking with us today. And everybody, you can connect with Rosie at her website, rosiemolinari.com. We'll put links to all her social media and the book and everything else in the post where I share this. And join us for more conversations about yoga and body image and self-acceptance over at bodypositiveyoga.com. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you so much.